Florida hides more nightmares than a Disney villain origin story. You already know the brochure version of this state. Glossy beaches, postcard sunsets, palm trees, and little lizards doing push-ups on your front step. But there is another Florida that never makes it onto billboards. Towns where the air conditioner is broken more often than it works. The jobs disappeared years ago, and hope seems to clock out before dinner. And no, this is not about Miami traffic, theme park prices, or alligator politics. This is about places you have probably never heard of, and in some cases, there is a reason for that. Today, we are descending into the 5 worst places to live in Florida. Not the usual suspects. These are the forgotten communities with stunning views and brutal statistics. One town's football program is more famous than its entire local economy. Another has water that smells like it time-traveled from the 1980s and never updated. Think you understand Florida? Prove it. Because the harsh truth is this: the worst place to live is not always the one with sirens and headlines. Sometimes it is the town defined by silence, and you are absolutely not ready for the place that is seriously considering dissolving itself out of existence. Choose wrong, and it could cost you thousands of dollars, or something harder to replace, your sanity. So if you like avoiding disasters before you sign a lease or close on a house, hit that subscribe button now. Your future self might thank you for this one. Let us break it down. Number 5. Pahokee. In Pahokee, the land can grow just about anything, except a stable economy. Sit with that while you picture it. A small city ringed by some of the most fertile agricultural soil in the United States, and yet still fighting to keep the lights on at City Hall. Beneath the sugarcane fields and the glossy brochures, the real story is a lot less sweet. Pahokee sits along the southeastern rim of Lake Okeechobee. It is quiet, scenic, and packed with more untold stories than a courthouse on a Friday afternoon. On paper, a town built on agriculture, lakefront access, and a pipeline of football legends should be thriving. Instead, the reality hits harder than midsummer humidity. During past downturns, unemployment has spiked as high as 35%. The median household income hovers around $30,000, barely over half of Florida's average. Utilities and infrastructure are chronically underfunded, so maintenance is more like triage than planning. As the population shrinks, the tax base erodes, and basic city services start to feel optional. Crime here is less about chaos and more about stagnation. It rises and falls with the local economy, a slow burn kind of problem rather than a nightly news spectacle. And then there is the politics. Pahokee has spent years tangled between county oversight, state-level grants, and federal programs that seem to arrive slower than a Florida DMV line. Accusations of mismanagement, questions over missing funds, and development deals that appear with a splash and disappear like heat mirages have left residents asking the same question over and over: who is actually steering this ship? One local Reddit comment nailed it: Pahokee is where ambition goes to sweat while waiting for city funding. And yet somehow, the town continues to produce NFL-caliber athletes at a rate that turns college recruiters into regular visitors. When getting out feels like the only way up, football becomes less of a sport and more of an escape hatch. Living in Pahokee does not feel like a disaster movie. It feels like a slow documentary about what happens when systems fail quietly. You notice it in the water bills creeping higher, in the roads that desperately need resurfacing, in city projects that get pushed to next fiscal year. You see grant proposals that might save something if they ever get approved. You scroll through job listings that read like they were posted in 2014 and then abandoned. Government transparency here shows up as a recurring character, sometimes absent, sometimes delivering uncomfortable truths about what it costs to run a city with fewer taxpayers and greater needs. If economics are the walls of a town, governance is the foundation. And Pahokee's foundation has been patched and repatched like a college student's MacBook charger. It technically works, but only if you do not move it the wrong way. The resilience is real, but so is the strain. Then there is the environment. Pahokee humidity does not just exist, it attacks. It wraps itself around you, shakes you, and negotiates what you are having for lunch. The mosquitoes show up like they are operating a neighborhood protection racket. Some streets feel like they were last paved during the Carter administration. If your car survives a full year on those roads, it deserves a medal or at least a therapy session. Step outside at sunrise and the scene is almost cinematic. The lake glows. The fields carry the scent of damp sugar and gasoline. A heron glides across a glassy surface. It is beautiful until the smoke from cane burning drifts over, the school buses shudder past, and you remember that the nearest full-service grocery store is a drive, not a stroll. Pahokee is paradise with a long list of conditions at the bottom of the contract. And if you think Pahokee is complicated, wait until you get to the next place. A town where the struggle is so deep, it is not just fighting to survive. It is practically negotiating its own existence. Number 4. Belle Glade. In Belle Glade, they say the soil is rich enough to grow anything except opportunity. So let us clear something up immediately. Belle Glade has potential, real, tangible, hard-edged potential that should have turned it into one of Florida's standout success stories. It has farmland, it has history, it has year-round sunshine, and it has a Lake Okeechobee view that could make a painter emotional. But then reality shows up, uninvited, and sits down like it owns the place. Here are the numbers, not the myths. Belle Glade sits at the heart of Florida's sugarcane empire, a place where sugar rules and most residents are left scraping by. The median household income is roughly $26,000. The poverty rate hovers around 35%, more than double the national average. Unemployment regularly ranks among the highest in the state. The violent crime rate climbs over 60% above the national norm. Rental options are extremely limited, and even the affordable units are not always what most people would consider livable. The town's official motto is, "Her soil is her fortune." On paper, it sounds poetic. In practice, it raises an uncomfortable question. If the soil is the fortune, who is actually cashing in? Because it is clearly not the average resident. Belle Glade is what happens when agriculture generates millions while the labor force gets crumbs. This area helps feed a huge share of the country's sugar demand. Yet when you drive through town, you see cracked sidewalks, failing pipes, and schools stretched thin on funding. Local government has faced heavy criticism over the years for mismanagement. Budget transparency ranges from inconsistent to opaque. Revitalization initiatives often show up with big promises and then stall out, underfunded or buried in layers of bureaucracy. Here is where it gets even more lopsided. Palm Beach County profits from the economic engine Belle Glade helps power, but much of that wealth never circles back. What you see is a textbook case of resource extraction without meaningful reinvestment. The revenue leaves. The problems stay behind. And what most people never hear is that many of Belle Glade's issues do not come from outright collapse. They come from being ignored. This is the kind of town where you can stand next to a crop worth millions of dollars while your streetlight has been out for 9 years and your neighbor's roof is being held together by hope and a single weathered tarp from Home Depot. You roll past miles of golden cane fields. The air smells like barbecued sunlight and dust. Then you hit the edge of town and it feels like someone forgot to finish the level. Potholes big enough to swallow a rental car. A grocery store that closes at 6 in the evening. Want a decent coffee shop? Good luck. The most modern device in a 10-mile radius might be the vending machine at the DMV, and it still demands coins. Step outside and the sky is flawless, a perfect blue dome. The air is thick, but not in that salty beach town kind of way. It is more of a guess what pesticide that is thickness. Sugarcane fields stretch toward the horizon, but the streets beneath your feet are fractured, the power grid flickers, and across the road somebody's front yard looks more like a pawn shop overflow than a lawn. It feels less like Florida went wrong here, and more like Florida forgot to show up at all. So here is a question for you. Would you rather live in a town with no jobs but a perfect view, or in a place with jobs but no soul? Drop your answer in the comments. The responses to that one are going to be chaotic. Because if you think being exploited is bad, wait until you see what it looks like when a town is not just struggling, but genuinely wondering if it should keep existing as a town at all. Number 3. Century. Century, Florida. Population, 1,700, give or take whoever packed up and moved out last week. This is not just another small town on a forgotten highway. Century is the kind of place where even time itself seems to have grabbed a suitcase and walked away without saying goodbye. Blink once and you will miss it. Blink twice and you might accidentally end up running for mayor unopposed. At first, the name sounds promising. Century feels like something from a charming, historic walking tour. White porch swings, old-school diners, neighbors who still wave from their rockers. But then you arrive and realize the town is less quaint Americana and more ghosted by the entire 20th century. The picture does not match the postcard. Here is what the data actually shows. Median household income sits around $30,000. The poverty rate climbs past 33%. City financial audits paint a messy picture. In 2019, state investigators uncovered hundreds of thousands of dollars in missing or mismanaged funds. Infrastructure is falling apart. Water systems leak, power delivery is patchy, and the broadband is slower than a turtle with performance anxiety. As for the job market, even Dollar General reportedly struggled to keep positions filled. And yes, this town has seriously debated whether it should dissolve itself. As in, should we just stop being a town altogether? When your city council meetings start sounding like a Reddit thread titled, "Are we still a town or just a vibe?" you know the situation has gotten strange. Living in Century is not dramatic. It is not the kind of place that generates sensational headlines. Instead, it delivers the slow drip of forgotten promises and deferred maintenance. City services run on what feels like duct tape and collective prayer. Economic development plans get stuck in committee meetings that no one bothers to live stream, and at times it genuinely becomes unclear who is actually in charge or whether anyone really wants the responsibility. State audits have flagged Century for fiscal mismanagement repeatedly over the past decade. Misplaced funds, sloppy bookkeeping, and questions that never seem to get answered. The town's own mayor once admitted they were doing the best they can, which in municipal language is basically code for "we are winging it." Let us talk about some of the surreal details. There is a paved parking lot in Century with no building attached to it. Just pavement, sitting there like a monument to a plan that never got funded. It looks like someone played SimCity, ran out of budget halfway through, and just left the file open. Add in roads that feel like they are actively resisting the concept of tires, and you have got a town that basically challenges your vehicle to a fight every time you back out of your driveway. Step outside on a Century morning. The air is thick with the sound of crickets and the scent of pine trees. A breeze rolls through that smells like someone is mowing a ghost's backyard. You wave at a neighbor. Or was that just a curtain moving? You walk to your mailbox, open it. Empty. Of course it is. The town budget probably forgot to order stamps. So here's a question. Would you live in a place where the local government once misplaced half its budget, but rent was under $500 a month? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. I am genuinely curious. And here is a sidebar fact for you. Did you know Century used to be a coal mining boomtown? That is right. It went from coal-powered prosperity to bureaucratic chaos. The rebrand, if we are being honest, is not going great. Remember how Belle Glade's motto was, "Her soil is her fortune"? Century's motto should probably be, "Under construction forever." Because if you thought Century's identity crisis was rough, wait until you meet the next town. A place named after a promise it could not keep, and where the irony is so thick you could spread it on toast. Number 2, Frostproof. Frostproof, Florida. A name that sounds like a weather guarantee. A warm little refuge immune to cold snaps, hard freezes, and the frostbite of economic hardship. But surprise, that name was a marketing gimmick. It is like naming a swamp Paradise Hills and then acting shocked when tourists leave in tears. Let us be clear about something. Frostproof did not land on this list because it is loud, chaotic, or scandalous. It landed here because it is quiet in all the wrong ways. The median household income sits just under $37,000, well below the Florida state average. More than 25% of residents live below the poverty line. The job market is razor thin, dominated by citrus farming and seasonal labor. But after years of citrus greening disease and repeated hurricane damage, finding stable work is more luck than logic. Public schools consistently score below average. The violent crime rate is double the national average, and the nearest full-service hospital? Pack snacks, because it is going to be a drive. One Reddit user described Frostproof as a peaceful place to die of boredom or bad infrastructure. It is not dangerous in the flashy evening news kind of way. It is the slow kind of danger. Stagnant wages, chronically underfunded services, and a vibe that feels like a loading screen that paused 3 years ago and nobody hit refresh. The real cost here is that Frostproof sells you warmth and sunshine, but living in this town often means fighting an economic deep freeze every single day. There is charm, absolutely. Small homes, older neighbors who have been here for decades, citrus groves that smell like concentrated Florida. But charm does not pay the electric bill, and while the town might feel peaceful, that peace comes with strings attached, almost no economic opportunity, very limited services, and a local government operating on a budget that looks like it was written on the back of a crumpled receipt. Some places feel like they are on the edge of something big, like momentum is just around the corner. Frostproof feels like it has been waiting for a comeback that nobody is actively planning. You named your town Frostproof back in 1915 to lure citrus investors with a weather fantasy. Clever? Sure. But 100 years later, when the local economy is frozen solid and the job market is iced over, the irony is not just thick, it is suffocating. Let us talk about the roads. I drove through Frostproof once and hit so many potholes I thought I had accidentally entered a video game bonus level. Then there is downtown, one antique store, a gas station, and a cafe that closes at 3 in the afternoon. Like, what if I want a melancholy snack after lunch, and do not even ask about Wi-Fi? If you catch a signal, guard it with your life. That is your lifeline to the outside world. Picture this. You wake up to the sound of a rooster in the distance, not an alarm clock. The sky is soft orange, glowing with early light. The air smells like sun-baked grass mixed with diesel fumes. It is quiet. Maybe too quiet. You decide to drive into town for breakfast. The one diner is closed on Tuesdays. Your car rattles over 3 separate potholes before you even reach the main road, which somehow has worse pavement than your own driveway. Here is a stat to chew on. In Weston, Florida, the crime rate is half the national average, and the median income is over $115,000. In Frostproof, that same income number is hovering near the poverty line, and the crime rate is double the national norm. Same state, wildly different weather forecast for your bank account. And if you think a town struggling with irony is bad, buckle up, because the #1 spot goes to a place that is not just forgotten, it is functionally invisible. A town that used to matter, and now exists in a kind of limbo where progress drives past without stopping and nobody seems sure what comes next. #1, Fort Meade. If Florida were a storybook full of sun-drenched dreams and endless possibilities, Fort Meade would be the chapter someone tore out and forgot to reprint. This is not an exaggeration. This town feels like a rough draft of something that never got finished. All set up, no payoff. A forgotten sentence at the bottom of a Wikipedia page that never got properly sourced. Welcome to the oldest town you have probably never heard of. Fort Meade used to be a big deal. It holds the distinction of being the oldest city in Polk County. At one point, it was a legitimate trade hub, a phosphate boom town with railroads, outside investors, and real momentum. And then, without much ceremony, progress built a freeway that went around Fort Meade instead of through it, and the town never recovered. Here is where things stand today. The population sits at roughly 5,000 people, and that number keeps shrinking. Median household income is approximately $38,000. The poverty rate hovers above 23%. The job market is limited to the point of being almost theoretical. One Reddit user summed it up perfectly. If you want work, you either pray Walmart is hiring or learn how to fix your neighbor's lawnmower. Schools are underfunded. The local economy is limping along on agriculture, seasonal labor, and dollar store logistics. And despite the town's so-called historic charm, Fort Meade has been quietly sinking under the weight of infrastructure neglect, chronic underinvestment, and what can only be described as a serious identity crisis. It is not thriving. It is not collapsing. It is just stalling, indefinitely. Living in Fort Meade feels like being trapped inside an old photograph. It is pretty, sure, but it is stiff, static, frozen in a version of itself that does not exist anymore. The roads are cracked and uneven. Most of the shops are shuttered. The economy clings to agriculture, seasonal gigs, and the occasional logistics job at a big box store. Government assistance is minimal at best. Development plans mostly live on whiteboards in back rooms, half erased and never executed. It is the kind of place where the city budget feels like a group text where half the people have read the message but nobody ever replies. And yet, there is no widespread anger. Just exhaustion. People are tired of being forgotten, tired of waiting for the next version of Fort Meade that never quite finishes uploading. You know the situation is dire when the most disruptive economic event in recent memory was a Dollar Tree opening across the street from a Family Dollar. That is not growth. That is two discount stores staring at each other across a pothole-riddled parking lot. Let me ask you something. Why does every struggling Florida town like this have a dozen churches, 3 antique stores, and exactly 1 Chinese takeout spot inside a gas station? And why is the Wi-Fi so slow it gives you time to rethink your entire life while a web page loads? I checked Yelp once out of curiosity. Someone gave the local library a 1-star review for being closed on Mondays and smelling like old tax returns. Welcome to Fort Meade, where even the Yelp reviews are just tired. Picture yourself waking up here. You open your eyes to the sound of cicadas, not traffic. You step out the front door. The air is still, humid, peaceful in a way that feels almost suspicious. It smells like pine needles soaked in moisture. The roads are empty. You wave at a neighbor because it is the same person you have been waving at for 20 years. There is beauty in the calm, no question. But that beauty starts to crack when you realize the nearest legitimate job fair is 30 miles away, and the only coffee shop within walking distance is your own kitchen. Fort Meade is the kind of town where if a tumbleweed rolled down Main Street, it would probably get elected to city council unopposed. There would be no campaign, no debate. Just a tumbleweed with a name tag sitting at the table nodding along. So that is the list. 5 places in Florida where the postcards lie, the infrastructure crumbles, and the opportunities dry up faster than a puddle in July. These are not the towns that make travel blogs or retirement guides. These are the places people leave, not move to. The ones where survival is impressive and thriving feels like science fiction. If you made it this far, do me a favor. Like this video if you have ever visited a town and thought, did I just accidentally time travel to a place progress forgot? Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep avoiding the kinds of mistakes that cost you money, time, or peace of mind. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next breakdown, because trust me, there are more stories like this hiding all over the map. And drop a comment. Tell me which town shocked you the most, or if you have lived in any of these places and survived to tell the tale. I read every single one, and your stories make this whole thing worth it. Thanks for watching. Stay smart, stay curious, and whatever you do, read the fine print before you sign that lease.